All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is July 29th, 2020, and I'm back with another edition of the Wednesday live show. Hope everybody's doing okay. And so today I thought that we would take a look at some of the open trades. Well, take a look at all the open trades. There's not a whole lot now. Look at some of the recently closed trades and take it from there. So, real quick, take a peek at the overall market here. Interestingly enough, market's kind of gone nowhere for a while. You guys recall that I had like this sort of resistance zone up here. I mean, it's remarkable, how it's been able to rally and basically continue this rally. But geez, I mean, you can go all the way back to around here, which is towards the beginning of first week of June, and we're basically sort of at the same levels there. So this little gap here kind of represents a fairly significant overhead resistance. But it's a miracle that the market was able to have this sort of V-shaped recovery, and so and of course, there's a lot more to the story, and let's take a look at the cues here. Look at that. Pretty amazing. So there was the old high on the NASDAQ 100. Talk about a V-shaped recovery. Just blew right through it. The Dow is, the Dow seems to be struggling a little bit more. I guess I'll adjust that trend line. Yeah, the Dow is just kind of meandering here. It's made a lower high. I don't know how valid these trend lines are anymore, but in the near term now, we got like a little bit of an overhead resistance line there. And sometimes it's better to, or at least personally, the Dow's kind of like squeezed in this little triangle here. So kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, the difference in performance between the different indexes is truly astounding. And everybody knows that, it's like the big five NASDAQ stocks or whatever represent like 20% of the S&P and like the majority of the NASDAQ 100. So lots of weird stuff going on. And I believe that tomorrow, um, like four of those big cap tech stocks that have really been powering the market higher, they're coming out with earnings. So we're right in the thick of earnings season here. And as you guys know, the open trades that we have will get closed ahead of earnings if they're still open. So we've had some of the open trades close by tagging the trailing stop, and so otherwise there'd be a couple of getting closed like today and tomorrow over earnings. So anyway, without further ado, let's just jump right in here and take a look at what we have right now for open trades. And this list has been paired considerably. So we'll take a look at. Also wanted to go back over some of those stocks that got closed recently because a few of them made extraordinary moves, and so I figured we'd look through all this. So real quick, we'll start from the bottom. I always like to look at the ones that have been open the longest, see how they're doing here. This CENTA, you guys remember last week? I drew like a big box around this price action. Yeah, it's fairly constructive, although it's basically just been trading sideways for what seems like a whole month here. So nothing too exciting, other than the fact that it actually did hit the target, and it's looking okay today. It's having a little bit of a rally here, so but it just seems to be it's kind of like got the little inverse head and shoulders pattern going here, right? I deleted that box off of when I was looking at it this morning. I deleted this off of the chart only to put it right back on now. So you can see how it's just sort of consolidating up here at the highs. Not looking too bad, to be honest with you. Um, Earnings are not imminent on this, so it's going to play out. And basically, this trailing stop hasn't moved in over a week. but hasn't moved since the last time I did the show here. So just consolidating in, this area here, and so that trailing stops moved up to 33, and so it is what it is. We'll see if it tends to have these big up days and then like reverse them pretty quickly. So we'll see if it gets a mojo going here. So moving up the list from the bottom, QGEN. This is a pretty amazing chart, to tell you the truth. The funny thing about this is that with a run like that, with this just amazing sort of run higher. Look at all these days where the higher lows in a row. You don't see that too often. You'd think this thing was well, it's up pretty big. It's as of last night's close, it was up 15%. So that's a pretty good move, but just the volatility and the beta, I guess, the ranges on this particular stock. Typically, you'd look at a chart like this and think the thing was up 50% and it's up 15%. But so far, so good. And you can see how that trailing stop is really tightened up, right? On some of these, when they make these, what you'd call parabolic moves like this, the stop will tighten and get more aggressively tightened, I guess you could call it. And so basically, at this point, the stop is pretty much protecting like, an area just under the previous day's low. So, and that tends to, once they start doing that, then it tends to lock in profits pretty quickly. So, or I should say lock in profits on, on the first sign of a downturn. So, looking pretty good though. That's that's definitely a kind of an outlier because typically, you don't get an alert like this and then a few days later it starts to take off and then make a move like that. I mean, that's unbelievable, really. But again, the you can see that the scale over here is not too dramatic. So, all right, moving on. Next on the list is QLYS, which got a pretty good looking chart, honestly. This one's been open for a while, since back here like 7.6, right? There's a trigger right there, and yeah, we looked at it, at the time that it was triggering on the show, and I marked kind of like these two little spots here where it sold down to and then reversed and trend line break and all that. So it's a nice pattern. It's basically, as we speak here, it's literally like completing the cup back up to the previous highs, which were back at the end of May, beginning of June. So kind of amazing, honestly. It's had a couple little fits and starts along the way. You can see there's a couple of days here where it got real squirrely. Like for these 4 days, you had some big long range days, but the stop sort of hung back enough to keep it in. So this stop right here at 109. Let me check that. Trailing stop 109. Yeah, I would expect just based on what I'm seeing here today. So I would expect that to come up after the update tonight. It was in a pretty good spot, going into today, right? But you can see, so it's plowed through the target yesterday. Now, tagged the target here this day, but it broke and closed above it, and now it looks like a breakout basically. It's going to try and break out. So beautiful looking swing trade pattern there, right? Nice little sort of orderly pullback, little consolidation sideways, and then starts to swing higher. We jump in on it and you get a continuation back to the previous highs. So can't complain about that. Honeywell is Honeywell's just kind of hanging in there. Just kind of hanging in there. The trigger was back down here when it broke out this little triangle, and then it gapped up the next day, and it actually looks like it closed that gap. Yeah, closed the gap a couple days ago, and starting to move a little bit higher. So not too bad of a chart, honestly. It's kind of a weird little hump here. It doesn't have that cup pattern, but if it gets something going to the upside now, cool thing about it is that the trailing stop has ratcheted up to basically the trigger price, right? So that's always a good thing. All right, next up, got a couple of Exxon Mobil is just kind of hanging around here. Now, let's see, last week, what day was this? I guess it was last Tuesday. These energy stocks looked like they were going to get something going, right? I remember that. There was like this weird day where it seemed like there was a rotation from out of big tech stocks into energy stocks, right? And there's been a couple of days recently that have looked like that, but not really getting any follow through on this, and so it's just kind of hanging around here. So I drew this level last week. This is basically it's going to need to bust out of here. It's going to need to break out of this range, and so the stop hasn't moved since it initially triggered. So see what happens there. If you zoom out a little bit further, if it can get something going to the upside, it looks like there's tons of potential here, but that's a big if. So, and a stock like this is it's kind of boring, and if you choose to play it, then you can expect a lot of sitting around and waiting and nothing too exciting happening. Although, there was a couple of spots where it did make pretty big moves, but anyway, that's where the discretion comes in. You can choose to say, hey, ExxonMobil, although it's got a pretty good dividend, I would imagine. So just for the fun of it, I'll pull up real quick on my other screen here. I'll pull up and just see, out of curiosity, what the dividend on ExxonMobil is. Oh wow, 7.99%. Call it 8%. That's pretty significant. 8% dividend yield. Wow. Huh. And then last but not least on the open trades is XOP, which has basically got the same pattern because it's an ETF that's exploration and production. So there you go. It's got the same sort of pattern going on. Broke the trend line, looked like it was going to get something going, and it's kind of backing and filling a little bit. And the stop basically is just the initial trailing stop is just kind of sitting there sideways and sort of protecting it. So not too exciting unless there was something were to like spark a rally in this. So if it does, if this thing can start to rally up just like ExxonMobil, there's a lot of potential, right? Because it's still way beaten down here. So anyway, that's it for the open trades, right? Couple of them, the QGEN, the QLYS, couple of really nice, significant gainers, and that's what I wanted to go over some of these recent close trades, like just the ones. I think just the ones I want to look at are the ones that have been closed like over the past week or so, right? And I want to start down here with this QDEL because it was up 57%. And so that's yeah, here you go. QDEL. Boy, look at how many times the stop moved on this. Yeah, this is just was a really good setup to start off with, and it just looked great because it had that nice little sort of triangle pattern that it broke out of, and then it took off and never looked back. Stop, ratcheted up, and then after this big long range day in this, it got really tight up here, and so that's where it got taken out. And yeah, and so I mean that ended up with an extremely significant gain, and looks to me like yeah, it kind of looks like it's sort of coiling up here. Excuse me. A couple of these closed trades that came down and nicked the raised trailing stop. still look kind of interesting to me. So anyway, that was a beauty. And then of course, the mining stocks that we had open, those were pretty awesome too. This was a really good setup here, and you can see what happened. And then, this trailing stop, there's the target here. This trailing stop just kept ratcheting up, ratcheting up. And when you got this runaway move, it just tightened up basically to protect the lows of these parabolic sort of candles here. And so that's what you got. So anyway, and then you had you had that move, and now it's kind of looking like, well, I don't know. I mean, all of a sudden now gold and silver have really sort of taken the spotlight, so to speak, and that was a really good looking trade, and worked out pretty good. So ended up with yeah, almost 18% gain on that. So moving on. LRN. Yeah, this is the one. This LRN here, this is the one that and look at this move today. This is amazing that it's continuing. This is what I was saying about the consolidation is it just kind of consolidated really up here at the highs, and it started having some long range days. You can see here, lots of long range days, and so that stop just tightened up and took the trade out way up here. But this is almost like a big bull flag or whatever that looks like it has potential to break out again. So moving on, WPM. WPM looking pretty good here. Of course, it's closed, but this was another one that we spent a lot of time going over when it was an open trade, and ended up making a huge move. It looks like the trailing stop. Well, let's see. I don't know if I marked that on here. 51.40 was where it finally got taken out. So that was up. That would have been up here like this day. But anyways, it still kind of looks pretty good. But these gold and silver stocks, they kind of got crazy and look like they're ready to come back down to earth just a little bit. So can't argue with getting out. Although it did tag the stop and then still make a big push higher, but unsustainable pretty much. So there's been a lot of stuff lately that that have just made these incredible moves, and you don't know how long it's going to last, but sometimes it lasts longer than you would expect, and it makes that extra push. But typically, if you chase it, then at some point it reverses, and I mean a lot of these type of parabolic moves are just unsustainable. So, but that was another really good one. That ended up 27%. So, and then for the last couple here are a little lackluster. Hang on just a second. All right, sorry about that. I had a little interruption. Had a little interruption in the show. No big deal, but all right. So moving on. Yeah, Boeing. Look at Boeing. Boeing looked like it had something going on, and there was no follow through. And then of course they just released earnings, and you can see this reaction today. Kind of interesting. They had the CEO on this morning on CNBC, and anyway, so it was a decent sort of setup, but sometimes they just fail, and so this is one that you know looked like it was going to get something going to the upside, triggered in, and just faded back down and bounced, and then just faded, and so that happens. Um, And so, if they don't get the follow through and turn back up, then they get closed out, and we just move on. So not a huge big deal, but so there's a case of one that didn't work out. And you could just sort of tell over here it was kind of, and of course, all the bad news and all that, but the system is just looking at the chart. And so it saw this chart and it said, hey, after this pop here and this little, higher low and whatever it was thinking, it thought that that it could get a little traction from a breakout here, which didn't happen. So, and then last but not least, the most recent closed trade here, this WERN is basically didn't quite make it to the target. You can see this kind of lackluster action. It it was kind of in an uptrend, and then it would sell off, and then got really close to the target, and then just sold off again. And so, system is kind of getting the stop to break even kind of important. And so as the price moves and as time goes on, the system's going to ratchet that stop up, try to get it to break even. And so you get hit at break even, it's not a huge deal, right? Didn't lose anything. And so um, nowadays you don't even lose commissions. So this one, certain times we looked at it, it didn't really look too exciting, and then other times it looked like it had some potential, but basically just couldn't really quite get anything going to the upside. And I mean, that doesn't mean that like it could turn right back around and go back up here, because that's kind of what this pattern looks like. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. So anyway, out all these recently closed trades here, there's some really extraordinary percent. This minimum column here, this min column, is basically if all you did was if you were able to enter at the trigger and just follow the trailing stop. That's like the minimum. That's the price move you'd have got. The max column over here is basically just that's the max move that it made past from the trade barrier higher. And then of course, you're never going to capture the max move, but it's just interesting to see. So it calculates that. So anyway, real quick, do a quick show today. Today's Fed day, and so the market's kind of just hanging out and just get a little something going to the upside. But yeah, we're kind of in the summer doldrums here, and the market seems to be outperforming, outperforming what most people think the economy is doing. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's kind of dull, been kind of dull from day to day. So anyway, so look at some of these setups here. Here's one that's in a pullback, not imminent to trigger, but the system is looking for, out in the future that this thing could, consolidate and turn back up. This one, looks like we had a trade in this back in March, but yeah, this is it's a little volatile up here, but it's in the middle of a pullback and looks like it could be turning higher. So this plan here looks like this one triggered, hit the target, came down and got stopped out about break even, but it's setting up again. So yeah, the bigger pattern on this is not too exciting, but hey, you could get something similar last time. It did hit the target, right, last time, and within a couple of days. So jam through these real quick. ADI, analog devices. Nice uptrend, a little bit of a dip, and there's some potential here. Not too striking. This one's got a pretty decent little look to it. I kind of like the look of that little pivot low right there. So this is another one that's on the pending list, and you can take a look and see what the trigger price is on there. So it's basically, it'll trigger on a close above these recent highs here. So this one looks like it has a lot of potential to take off, right? So let's see, a couple more here, and then that's gonna be it. Yeah, this one's actually kind of up by the highs, not too exciting as far as the pattern goes. And then finally, Nike. Huh. I guess that was the previous high. All right, so yeah, Nike's actually kind of interesting here. It looks like, and of course, I think Nike releases earnings like at a weird time, like they've already released earnings or something. It's not pending, but I'd want to verify that, which I haven't. But that's typically, I seem to remember Nike's always like real early as far as the earnings. But hey, you never know because we're right in the thick of earnings season here. So anyway, out of all the pending trades, this one looks like it's got the best sort of setup right now. So look at that. That's a wild looking pattern there. But it's consolidating and kind of, if it breaks out and can close up here, then it could, make another run up. So out of all the pending trades, that's the one that I think looks the best right now. So anyway, I thought I would do like kind of a quick show today, and like I said, not a whole lot going on. Um, the open trades have been pared down. Expect to see a few of these get closed ahead of earnings here in the next couple of weeks too, and we'll see what else triggers and pops in or whatever. But Nike's got an interesting look to it, so I'd keep a close eye on that. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Fed says today, and I guess Congress is arguing over the next stimulus bill, so that's out there floating around, and we had a pretty good market cycle, honestly. The system kind of uses the cycles in the market to do its thing, and that last batch of stocks that cycled through ended up with some amazing winners. And so now we're kind of, have everything's pared down a little bit. Of course, being right in earnings season, and that's how everything sort of cycles through, right? So anyway, if the market would pull back a little bit, it would set up some other stuff. So we'll just have to see what happens. But anyway, so I will leave it there, and I will see you guys back here next Wednesday for another edition of the show. Thanks for